Hello, seventh graders. I wanted to talk a little bit about how we can solve proportions and another new strategy that we can use when we are looking at proportions or looking at ratios and trying to determine if they're equivalent or not. So we talked about last week, we focused more on what I call mental math proportions or relationships, but basically where you're looking for some sort of connection between the two ratios that uses multiplication or division. And so, for example, here, if I have the two ratios, 2/3 and 8/12, and I want to know if they're proportional or not. Proportional meaning equal. Some of you might be able to see, well, 2 times 4 is 8, and so 3 times 4 is 12. And so we're scaling that 2/3 up by 4 to get 8/12. So that's one way to look at those two and know that they are indeed proportional or equal to each other. An additional way that we can look at ratios and determine if they're proportional or not is by using what we call their cross products. So product meaning the answer to a multiplication problem. So cross products are going to be our opposite numerators and denominators. And if two ratios are proportional, then their cross products are equal. So when I look at these two ratios, again, an additional way, if I saw that I'm just multiplying the numerator and denominator times 4, that's perfect. That's one way to show that they're proportional. If we don't see that connection between the numbers and the ratios, then we can use our cross product rule. So that means 2 times 12, so our opposite numerator and denominator, and product, meaning I'm multiplying them. If I multiply 2 times 12, I get 24. And what I'm going to do is compare that to my other cross products, 3 times 8. And if I multiply 3 times 8, I also get 24. So because they both have a product of 24, then that is an additional way to show, okay, then they are proportional to each other. So I could say that 2/3 is equal to 8/12. So sometimes we just have those, sometimes we have ratios that might be easier to see some sort of connection with. Sometimes we have ratios that are harder to see a connection with. So for example, 43 to 48 and 51 to 60. If I wanted to prove whether or not these are proportional, all right, I'm going to look at my cross products. So my opposite numerators and denominators. And I'm going to figure out the product of those numbers. So 43 times 60, and then I'm also going to end up multiplying 48 times 51. And so when I multiply 43 times 60, I get 2,580. And when I multiply 48 times 51, I get 2,448. So their cross products are not equal, which means that these two ratios are not equal as well. Okay, so it's just an additional way that you can decide if two ratios are proportional. We can also use that information about the cross products being equal to actually solve proportions. So when we are solving a proportion, that's when we have a missing, we have a variable in the proportion somewhere. And so first, I always want you guys to look for that mental math relationship or connection first, all right? If you see that you're just doubling the numbers, or you can multiply a number by 5 or something like that, if you see a relationship like that, that's going to be the easier way to do it. But if you don't see that relationship, the cross product method will always work. So when we look at this proportion, here we actually need to solve it. We're going to solve for A because there's a missing component to this proportion. So we have 48 to 6 is equal to 72 to A, and so I need to solve for A. Now, just to kind of go back to looking for a mental math relationship first and proving it two ways here. When I look at this, I see that 48 divided by 8 would equal 6, okay? And so if I do the same thing over here, 72 divided by 8, that would tell me that A would equal 9. But just to practice with our cross products, let's pretend that we didn't see that method or that connection. So when I look at my cross products, I see 48 and A and 72 and 6. So if I multiply 48 times something, remember I don't know what A is, that has to equal the same thing as 72 times 6. Well, I have enough information to multiply 72 times 6, and I get 432. So now I know that 48 times A has to have the same value as 432. So what I can do is I can divide 432 by 48 and figure out that A is going to equal 9, which we found that out using just that connection earlier with the dividing by 8. But if we didn't see that connection, we can use our cross products to solve it too. Let's look at another example. I have 18 to 30 is equal to x over 50. So again, there are multiple ways we could solve this. We could simplify this 18/30ths and get a simplified ratio, and then we might be able to see some connections. But if we don't see those connections right off the bat, the cross product method will always work. So if I look at some cross products I have 18 and 30, or sorry, 18 and 50, and 30 and x. So I know that 18 times 50 has to equal the same thing as 30 times x. When I multiply 18 times 50, I get 900. Has to equal 30 times something. So 30 times something equals 900. I can figure that out by dividing by 900 by 30. And 900 divided by 30 is going to equal 30. So on this one, x would equal 30 there. We're going to look at another example here. I have 5 to 8 is equal to y to 30. On this one, it's really hard to see a really clear relationship between the 5 and the 8 or the 8 and the 30. And there's nothing to simplify. So I can look at my cross products. I have 5 and 30 and 8 and y. So 5 times 30 is going to equal the same thing as 8 times y. When I multiply 5 times 30, I get 150. So 8 times something equals 150, so I can solve that by dividing 150 by 8. And I can figure out that y is going to be 18.75. We're going to look at one more example that's just a little bit trickier. Here I have 2x to 19 is equal to 72 to 76. So there technically is a relationship between the 19 and the 76. But if we don't see that, we can use the cross product rule as well. So we're going to look at 19 and 72 as some cross products. And then this one's a little bit different, but we're going to look at 2x and 76. So when I multiply 19 times 72, that should equal the same thing as 76 times 2x. And so when I multiply 19 times 72, I get 1,368 is equal to, and then when I multiply 76 times 2x, I can multiply 76 times that coefficient of 2 to get 152x. And then now I have an equation that I can solve. So 152 times something is equal to 1,368. So I can divide by 152. And get that x is going to equal 9. All right, I hope this helps a little bit with some proportions. Have a great day.